So today we're talking about diet and nutrition. We're talking about meat and prostate cancer, the consumption of animal products. We're talking about eggs, we're talking about dairy, and we're talking about sugars and fats and what feeds cancer, specifically prostate cancer. I'm interviewing Mr. Verne Varona, who's a world-renowned diet nutrition expert. He has handled hundreds of prostate cancer patients' diet and nutrition questions. He's led them through the process of eliminating things out of their diet and helping them get to a healthier state. So today we're going to answer a lot of the questions that have come from the comment section, and I hope you find this helpful. So thank you so much for coming back with us today. We're going to be answering some of the most popular questions in our comment section based off our other videos. And so the big topic that we get asked quite often is, can I eat eggs? If it is animal protein, should I stay away from them? What about the choline? And if, is it a thing I can have in moderation? Is it something that I shouldn't touch at all? So what does that look like for you as a nutritionist and an expert in this field?
The egg question is difficult because eggs are like a perfect food. On one level. They go with everything, and they're tasty, and they also can contrast whatever you're cooking it with, so it improves the taste of whatever you're cooking it with on some weird level. There's also a satiation aspect to eggs where they have 3 times the amount of cholesterol that you need in the course of one day, one egg. So there's a sense of feeling full that people are always after. They feel, that was a good meal. That's one of the things that people miss when they go vegan or become more vegan oriented. After a meal, they're going, so I need something else, because they're used to fat. So they're not really hungry, they're just fat addicted. They crave the oil. What's one of the reasons we crave eggs? It gives us a sense of solidity. But there is research about eggs and prostate cancer indicating that it is not a healthy food for prostate cancer. And people always tell me, clients will say to me, well, can I have 2? They get into what I call the negotiation phase. So they say, well, let me ask you something. If I had 2 a week, 3 a week, what would be the best way to, they always, and I just say, listen, the people I see healing themselves say, tell me what to do and I'll do it. Give me 2 weeks doing it, 3 weeks, you'll know. So my orientation toward all of this is not to get into too much scientific banter, because I've done that before. Because you can't, because what I realized at some point, aside from the efficacy of just knowing nutrition, okay, that's important to know what goes where and how and why, but sometimes those are really not the questions people have. It's the cover. It's, I heard that, if you eat grain, you can't digest it. It's not digestible. Try it. Here's a format for how to do it. And you know what? Here's the other aspect. There's no loss because there's no side effects from eating this way. It's not like I'm saying, this is arsenic, it's really poisonous, but just once you take a little bit, just take a little lick. It's not like that. There's no bad reaction. You might get a little tired first couple of days because you're used to getting stimulated all the time, but when you go through a dietary change, you'll crave those foods that are not supportive for you less and less. I don't believe eggs are supportive food. I do think we are so conditioned to eat them so frequently. I will tell people, eat eggs the minimum right now for 1 month, and then eat them and see how you feel. But for 1 month, maybe once or twice a week maximum, 1 or 2 eggs. And if you do have eggs, my rule, 2 to 3 times the amount of vegetables at that meal. So don't just have an omelet plain. Make a little bit of an omelet with, carrots, onions, cabbage mixed together. It's a wonderful sweet combination. Or just onions and like a Denver omelet, traditional Denver omelet, spices. And it's really interesting from a craving standpoint. Sometimes we will crave foods with high fat content if we eat a lot of spices or if we eat a lot of citrus. Those foods are more appealing. There's no real I have no stats on that. I've just observed over the years there are certain foods that have like an emulsifying quality internally, like vinegars. But eggs, I don't think are a supportive food for prostate cancer. They are a food that affects us hormonally, and the research shows that there's a really high percentage. I don't want to quote it until I get you the PDF, but yeah, for people who are really concerned about the details, there's a lot of detail we can add about that. But it's not a good supportive food. So my suggestion is, if you want to really heal, or you want to really see how this approach is going to affect you, just stay off eggs for a little while. How old are you now, Mr. Jones? 70? Okay. How many eggs have you had in your life? 350,000, right? Approximately? Okay. So let's take a couple of weeks, no eggs. The people I see healing themselves are not the people who are armed with information. They're the people on fire to do this. Why? Why do you want to get well? I want to get well because I have a wife and children. I love my wife. I love my kids. I want to see my kids grow up. I want to walk my daughter down the aisle. I have dreams myself. I want to do things I want to do. My first question to clients, what's important to you? Well, wait, I thought you were going to talk about food. No, we're not going to talk about food. Not right now. This is more important. What drives you to stay here? What drives you to get out of bed in the morning? Those things you have to remember, because those things you're going to need to do and pay more attention to as you're healing yourself, because they will be the life jacket for you that'll help you float through those really hard times when you're feeling conflicted. So I don't recommend them as a steady food. If you do have lots of vegetables with them, have them as minimum as you can. Maybe save them for when you go out and there's nothing to eat. But I don't think they're a real health supportive food. Also, from a quality standpoint, that's a whole nother issue. But I don't tend to hamper on quality because I feel it's kind of self-evident if you do the research.
Eggs are a huge breakfast staple, especially here in the U.S. and I know across the world. But really, when you think of everybody does like steak and eggs, or you have omelets, or you have all sorts of egg dishes. It's like American breakfast culture is so egg focused. So. And if they're not, we don't want to be taking in like pancakes and waffles and all these other types of foods. What would a really whole food breakfast look like for a prostate cancer patient?
What you have to look at first is, what was your dinner like the night before? Some people will eat a heavy dinner or a heavy chewing dinner, or there'll just be more of a volume issue. That colors what you want in the morning and how late you ate. So if you eat really late at night and a good volume, you're not going to want breakfast. These are the people who sit in front of me and say, I'm not a breakfast guy, I don't eat breakfast. And I say, do you eat at night? Well, yeah, this is not healthy. You need about 3-4 hours because food stays in your stomach for 3 hours. So it's ideally best to allow it to leave. You'll get a deeper sleep.
Now, when you say 3 or 4 hours, you mean before you go to sleep?
Prior
because
to bed.
I think people think,
Prior
I'm
to bed.
sleeping it off.
No, you won't sleep it off. You'll dream it off because eating late at night will make you dream more. That's how you expel excess calories. Excess caloric intake is dealt with by creating images in your mind based on what you're eating. Meaning, if you eat a lot of meat before you go to bed, a lot of animal protein, it requires Herculean digestion. It doesn't digest in the stomach, it stays there. And when it moves into the duodenum, then with pancreatic acids and with bile juices, it helps start to diminish and separate the fat. In the stomach, the fat might uncongeal, it might separate a little slightly, but the real digestion occurs in the duodenum. So that's 3 hours. It's going to stay there for approximately 3 hours in most people. You need to be really empty to get a good deep sleep, but not blood sugar, 6 hours and you're in bed thinking about crackers. We have it wired completely backwards because our breakfast in the morning usually are stimulating breakfast because we get up feeling like we're looking for the truck that ran us over. We're tired. We don't feel like we had a good deep rest. And sometimes people sleep longer to try and capture that rest. It's useless. Your deepest sleep is going to be before midnight, ideally. So if you're trying to heal, you're going to help your body heal by getting to bed before midnight, by being in a good deep sleep by midnight. If you're up at night, you're working or doing something important late at night, you miss that level of melatonin. You miss that melatonin production because you're up and you're in light. They have taken a completely dark room. They've taken a person who is asleep or just lying there prone, and they measured by the back of the knee. They shone a light on the back of the knee. And that reduced the melatonin level, just a little light. So important to have, for good sleep, dark, cool room. For deeper sleep, because of melatonin issue, aside from taking melatonin, that's a whole other issue. My suggestion is to make sure that you understand the morning breakfast is usually a sweet fest. It's pancakes. What do we eat pancakes for? It's just for the syrup. It's not for pancakes. It's for syrup. And then we have sweet in our coffee. And then we have a sweet roll, perhaps. I mean, it's a glut of acidity that we're taking in the morning. Yes, people want eggs sometimes. It's really interesting. If you get completely drunk on Friday night in the UK, what most people do Saturday morning is they have what they call a Saturday morning fry-up. There's ham, there's eggs, there's beef, it's crazy. I mean, it's like a coronary special, I call it, if you have it as a regular basis. But it's appealing because they're getting salt from the meat. So much sweet they've had that night before, or not sweet, but alcohol, they're craving that. So all I'm saying is your morning breakfast is also determined by your sleep and by what you ate at the last meal. But traditionally, if you wake up hungry, it's always good to get your body moving a little bit before you stuff something in it. And when you do, it's best to have a carbohydrate breakfast, complex carbohydrate. Not sweet rolls and pancakes, but more like, and this is the only thing I say that's a bit complicated for people or over the top for some people, you need to have some cereal in the morning. It's not just one cereal. There are many kinds of grains to have. Grain is indispensable for your nervous system, for your functioning, mental functioning, your B vitamin group. It's really critical. So what do I recommend for grain in the morning? Any cereal, any whole grain can be made into a cereal. And this, I guess, is the most complicated aspect of changing your diet to a more healthier diet. The ingredient of grain. It's big quagmire. People are really conflicted. There's a lot of misinformation. Everybody's worried about gluten suddenly. And that's valid. It's a valid concern. But my issue with it is oatmeal. Oatmeal basically starts out as a whole grain. It takes about an hour and a half to cook oatmeal. Truly, the whole oat. And in Scotland, they don't wait an hour and a half. They cook it all night long. They put it in a pot, they bring it to a boil at night, they put it on a simmer, and they let it stay all night long cooking. That's how you can cook whole oats. But you don't have to cook whole oats. The oat story is they take a whole oat and they roll it, so now it becomes completely flat. So more surface area is exposed, cooks quicker. Those are called flaked oats. Sometimes they take the whole oat and they just cut it with a machine that has like a 6-tooth sides. And what it does is it cuts it in a strange cut. It's called steel cut oats. Okay? And they're a little more chewy. I like them. It's very tasty. And then sometimes they take the oat and they make it into flour. Like for traveling, they say, hey, just add water to this. The flour cereals I don't recommend a lot because for some people they will raise blood sugar. And they raise the glycemic index because they're absorbed very quickly. But I would recommend oats in the morning. And if you want a little bit of fruit, here's the bottom line on that. It's nice to have a little fruit with your oatmeal. A couple of raisins, a little bit of cinnamon, what have you. But if you have a lot of fruit with your oatmeal, what happens in many cases is the oats get fermented by the digestion of the sugar. The sugar that you're taking from the fruit source will ferment the digestion of the grain. So if you mix that combination together a lot, I don't get heavily into food combining except for I just say don't mix desserts with anything. Have them separately. But if you mix the sweet with the oatmeal, very often you can get gas. And the problem with gas is embarrassing, it's discomforting, and it's a nuisance in general. So people get flustered. Like they'll say for beans, they'll say, I can't eat beans, are you kidding? But it depends on what you eat them with. I used to do restaurant consultations. In a restaurant, I would say, do not push apple juice or any kind of dessert right away when people are ordering a big bean meal. You got to find a way to tell, because people are going to have gas all the way home and say, I'm never going to that place again. You want to go easy. If you're having beans or if you're having a complex sugar like vegetables or grain, dessert is separate. Anything sweet should be ideally separate. Ideally, if you're sensitive or if you just want maximum digestion. There's quinoa. It's a grain that cooks in 10 minutes. There's buckwheat, which actually cooks in 10 minutes. It's a kasha. The Jews call it kasha. My mother's side was Jewish, and I was brought up with having kasha very often. And it's a warming grain. The Russian army fueled itself on it traditionally. It's a powerful grain. It has rutin in it and a number of really important elements. Often I have quinoa for breakfast. I'll have amaranth, which is another grain. It's a really tiny grain, but I love it. So I cook it an extra long time. And some people will say, well, I don't have time to do this cooking. It's not time you need. It's planning. It's like you get up early, throw it in the pot, get it going, bring it to a boil, put it on simmer, and then go away. And just come back in whatever amount of time you need to come back. So that's not a good excuse.
Before I get to my next question, I just wanted to remind you that this September we're having an in-person prostate cancer patients and caregivers conference. It's a great way to get your questions answered and to meet other people in the prostate cancer community. You can learn more at pcri.org. Also, please click that subscribe button because when you do this, it supports our channel. And if you would like to support us financially, you can do so at pcri.org/donate. Now back to my conversation with Mr. Varona. So what about for people who say that they have carb crashes after having grains in the morning? Is that because they're truly eating the proper grains or they're eating something else?
It's because they've been getting so much stimulus from what they've been eating previously. When they eat grains, it's like they don't feel it. Also, they're not absorbing it right away. It takes a while to learn to absorb, to get your gut to really learn to absorb. Weeks and weeks. But I have clients that do it very quickly. You mentioned carb crashing. It's a good term. It's not from the carbohydrates. It's from their own insensitivity or their own sensitivity. You can avoid that by making sure your breakfast is broader, more elements in your breakfast. So you might have a little toast, like a slice of toast. That's a bread product, but you know what? For a lot of people, they crave crunch. If you don't have bread, and I don't recommend that frequently. I'd probably recommend you take some pumpkin seeds, buy a bag of organic pumpkin seeds, and toss them in the big fry skillet, and put the heat on, a low heat, and just leave them for about 20 minutes. You have to go and keep stirring them, but get them slightly browned. If you want a real extra treat, just a tiny touch of soy sauce toward the end, which actually helps digest the oil from the seed. But that's a delicious way. Matter of fact, it's addictive. I probably not recommend you do this because you'll get seriously addicted. But if you do like pumpkin seeds and you want to do it, just make sure you take a small amount as a garnish and use it as a garnish on your cereal. The more garnishes you have, the more flavorful the cereal becomes. So you can have your choice of things. You could put, it could be nuts. You can also use nut butter sometimes in terms of diluting it and adding a little bit of nut butter to that. Some people don't have a tolerance for nuts. So in that case, my suggestion is maybe just have a pinch of salt in there and just learn to eat it, chew it. If you chew a steel-cut oat, if you really chew it, it'll actually get sweeter and sweeter. But most of us don't have the time, the patience, or the knowledge of knowing that that works like that. These are complex sugars that digest your mouth and get slowly turned to sugar. And it makes them much more appealing.
What about for portions?
It's a great question. Do this. That's the size of your stomach. I have friends that post on Facebook, they're like cooks or they're nutritionists, and they'll post, the pictures of what they ate sometimes. And my first thought when I look at plates, I thought, wow, that's a huge bowel movement. I mean, it's frightening how much food people try and put in. 80% full is the standard, 85% full, leaving a little area there. And I think, in a very simplistic way of thinking, the stomach is actually a hollow bag, and which churns and divides, rotates the food and rotates the juices around the food so you can begin initial stages of digestion with hydrochloric acid. When you fill up, I suspect that it's hard to really get adequate digestion that way because you get so much food in there. And the stomach is actually expanded. It sometimes even presses against the lung. That's when you get shortness of breath when you're eating too much. My suggestion would be eat less, and force yourself to eat less. Just design a plate where you take normal portions that you eat, put it in the normal portions there, and then subtract about a third of it. You can't tell people how much to eat. I love when I see these directions. 2 cups of this, 3 cups. How can we do that? Sometimes I don't even feel like eating a half a cup. So you have to show people how to scale it down according to how they feel. And my scale is to imagine a circle and imagine a third of that circle being whole grain every day. Whole grain in the morning will assure you in most cases of completing the bowel cycle. So within 17 to 24 hour period, no problem. So if you eat grain in the morning, by the next morning, you're more likely to have no problem evacuating. And I deal with a lot of people who do have those problems. And it's really interesting because when you first start eating grain, it'll actually constipate you for a day or two, just because it's a big change. They might try a suppository. They might, God forbid, they touch their abdomen. They won't do that. But I recommend doing it. Matter of fact, I show every client. One of my first studies was massage. I studied Japanese massage. I was living in a Japanese community studying Chinese medicine and Japanese medicine. And they were all teaching, self-healing stuff. Like, here, if you're tired, rub the shoulder. There are acupuncture meridians relate to the intestine here, gets the flow of energy going, blah, blah, blah. For whatever reasons they said, it worked. So I really got into studying it. And it's interesting because in Western massage, nobody touches the stomach. I have a guy that works on me regularly. And when he first worked on me, I said, do you know how to rub the abdomen? He says, not part of my studies. I mean, there are some important points there, but, I said, do you know about kneading? He said, not really. I don't, This guy studied for years. And he knew some basic techniques there, but I said, let me show you what I learned. So we changed parts, and he lied down, and I showed him how to rub in a very general way. I showed him how to put one hand calming, and the other hand was deeply, and he had to jump off the table and go to the washroom quickly. And I just said, that's because, on this lower left-hand side, that's where it was just hanging out. And how did it feel? It felt great to get rid of it, exactly. So the point is, yes, we need to get into our bodies a little bit. We're afraid.
Well, let me back up a second here. So one of the things that I realize, I don't think people understand why bowel movements and eliminating all of that is so important for their health.
Let me start simply with this. We can't digest everything we eat. We digest partial amounts of certain things that can't be broken down, like the outer covering of grain, the 7 layers around brown rice. That doesn't digest. There are nutrients in there, but it doesn't really break down. What a bowel movement is, as weird as it might sound, is everything that nutrition was taking out of it and it was scrunched down. It's like when you have a juicer and you put a bunch of carrots and you have all this pulp. We have excesses that we have to get rid of, that we can't digest. That's essentially what a bowel function is. What most people don't understand is that the intestinal tube, as it goes along, the way you eliminate is there are muscles around that tube, and the muscles do this. They actually take turns doing this. It's peristalsis, and it moves the matter along so it can be discharged. I have clients that say to me, oh, I have no problem with bowel movement. 1 glass of prune juice, oh man, I'm great. And I say, well, that's great that you know how to get rid of it quickly if you have to. But the truth is, that's not helping peristalsis. That just opens the bowel and you discharge it. You're not really treating the problem. The problem is you don't have peristalsis going on.
Are there toxic buildups in these, in our things that we need to excrete?
Depends on who you talk to. If you talk to people in the alternative world, they'll say, you've got linings of tar and bowel from years and years. I don't agree with that. And also, I've had friends that are GI specialists who told me they've never seen anything like that. You can have stuff to stay in there 4 months. A very famous singer was known for having a bowel movement stuck in there for 4 months. It's really important to understand bowel function because when you have lack of energy, problem is here. It's almost always intestinal. Yes, it could be blood-related anemia. There's a number of conditions it could be related to. But when you are not really energetic, first you have to look to this area. Are you having regular bowel movements? That's what you want to ask. And are they effortless? People don't like to talk about bowel movements because it's stinky, but not really. Your bowel movement will smell or smell offensive based on what you eat. So if you eat some really toxic food and you can't stand it, change your diet. Because that's just from the food. Yes, it will have a very kind of a neutral fragrance, but it won't be offensive.
Well, I think also people don't, I think when they've been in it for a long time, they've done the same practices for a long time, they don't understand that there's a better way. And it takes time. We are, in American society at least, everything is massive portions and convenience. We're fed these, and I hate to say it, but we really are fed these lies. If it's low fat, low sugar, so there's some substitute in it, and God forbid we put the word organic in it, it's perfect food, go eat it, you're fine. And that's so not true. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So if we go back to somebody who, let's say, they're trying to change the timing of their eating. We have a lot of people who are wondering
what time to eat during the day?
Yeah, like a lot of people wonder about intermittent fasting. Right. Are you a fan of intermittent fasting?
Suggestions like this can be sound and can be very effective. I did do a lot of fasting in my youth, in my 20s, when I was just getting into all this. I got into this when I was like 17 years old. But I think in most cases, this is a reaction to overeating and eating too much sweet. Okay. It feels good to not eat when you've done that previously. It feels good to just sort of empty out and not have.
So let me make sure I'm understanding the contrast. It's not that intermittent fasting is the great thing that makes you feel so good. It's that you're eating things that are not making you feel good, and the break of that just feels good in itself.
It's not only the break of it, it's in how the actual physiology, the biochemistry of fasting will actually neutralize some of those acids. Okay. So yeah, that could be helpful.
But if you had an optimal diet, intermittent fasting wouldn't necessarily be needed.
Somewhere in the Bible it says this, somebody told me this once, that we should fast with every meal. Meaning, we eat the minimum. If you eat minimum, you're not inclined to not want to eat food. You take a pendulum and you hold it at this end and you let it go. It's going to swing to the other end. And that's really what happens with our diets. And so anytime I hear something like that, I think, well, who is that good for? Who's attracted to that? And what habits do they have that foster that attraction?
So what about in situations where You have people who are coming into this new diet of not having animal proteins. They're maybe taking eggs out of their diet. They're focusing on the whole foods, as you said, and they're starting with grains in the morning, but they're concerned about their protein intake because the whole world now is preaching high protein, high protein.
Right.
We have the Ninja Creamies being bought with the protein mixes, and everybody's making customized Greek yogurt ice cream. There's 46 grams of protein in this. Like, everything is protein related.
Right.
So really, how many grams of protein should an average man have? Does it change depending on weight, height, or anything? And how are they going to get that protein in if they're not going to be taking in animal products?
Well, we're misled a little bit about protein, about how much protein we really need. The World Health Association, which has the lowest, recommends something like 36 grams a day. The average North American is doing pretty well with about 50 to 55. So I don't, and that's also a standard recommendation. I think it's 53 or 55, something of that nature. I think we're over-proteinized. And the breakdown of protein is a whole nother issue. Protein breaks down to nitrogen, sulfuric acid, has breakdown of uric acid, ammonia is one of the breakdown products. And these are pretty toxic elements. I think that, we're playing with fire if we depend on animal protein. We're not designed for animal protein. Our teeth are grinding teeth. Our gut is 30 feet, 28 to 30 feet. An animal that's a carnivore, like a dog, right? A dog will have almost a straight intestine to the discharge. It's not convoluted like ours is. So their protein stays and then is expelled. Ours has to make this circuitous journey around our intestine, for 24 hours or something like that to be discharged. It's a heavier food, takes longer to digest. And that's the first thing people notice when they change their diet, when you become less dependent on animal protein. When you're eating a diet like that, and you feel consistently well, suddenly you get a sensitivity to determine, oh, that was not good for me. I'm not going to eat that. Otherwise, you are prey to all the science, all the fads, all the unproven theories, and it's overwhelming.
I know, because in prostate cancer, we always talk about that there's so much noise. It's like there's so many treatments, and then there's the marketing behind the treatments. Right. Well, in diet, there's a billion times more. And I think everybody's going, okay, well, if I'm not on animal protein now, then how am I going to maintain this? And one of the things that we talk about is weightlifting. So does protein correlate to weightlifting? And if there is like 53 grams, like you said, as the average of what they're suggesting for protein, is that good enough that men can use that to build muscle over time? And is it really necessary?
Well, necessary is the issue. It's not really necessary. We eat far too much. We don't need as much. We also work out crazy. And we also are very focused on the external as opposed to the internal. So that's a societal issue. But at the same time, if you're working out, you might need a little more protein, but really what you need is more caloric intake. Bill Pearl is a very famous weightlifter, vegan for decades. He's one of the guys that said that. He just says you need more volume of food. You need to eat 4 or 5 times a day. Grain, vegetable, bean, just pack it in there. Your source of protein is beans. For 1/3 of the world, their source of protein is beans. They eat beans every day. When I was in Mexico, I stayed in Mexico, and I remember getting out early in the morning and going to the local market. There were like 20 kinds of beans. And it was fun. I just bought a whole bunch, and every day we cooked a different kind of bean. The answer to this question is, the first rule is don't jump whole hog into it. Understand what you're doing. Understand about the prostate issues really are more vegan diet. If you want to be vegan, great. I don't ever yell at people or say they have to become vegan. What I do say is that we do need to become less dependent on animal protein. You want to eat a little animal protein? We have canines, naturally. They could be fine. A small amount. What does that mean? Maybe once, twice a week. But not every day. Every day you're gambling. You're really gambling.
Does a typical vegan diet, like we're talking about a pretty big habitual change for a lot of people.
Yes.
That means never going to fast food, basically, because of the seed oils, the fats, the animal protein, the primary sources. I mean, right. I don't think there is a fast food chain you would trust. Am I correct?
There's always something I could find. I can get an avocado, or I can get some lettuce. I can get even white rice as a source of just feeling full. I'll go for white rice before I'll go for anything else if it's a regular fast food place. But fast food places are not really a healthy source of nutrition. And again, this goes back to the word planning. You just have to plan. I'm going out for the day. Where am I going to go? See, guys don't like to think about planning because, you want to be in control. I'll figure out what I'm going to do when I figure it out. I've heard a lot of comments from clients like this, and I realize this is just ingrained patterns that are, dominated by masculinity and ideas that suggest, this is masculine, this is not masculine. So you got to dump all that. And, if you're taking Lupron, you're going to be crying in commercials sometimes. I get clients telling me that. And that's just what happens hormonally. So that's part of the treatment for now. You're threatening your condition by making it over acid. And acidity is really the breakdown of sugar. And that's really the big issue. When these guys call me and I hear them and I hear the level of understanding they have and I see the application they make out for me, my questionnaire, I realize that I'm going to have to really hold this guy's hand because he's in the woods with all of this. And you got to have compassion for people because especially if they're older, they've been doing this for 50, 60 years. They're not used to change. Now they're forced to change. So yes, okay, then let's do it this way. Let's try this. This first week, let's get off caffeine. Get off stimulants. I don't take away people's caffeine. I say, drink a cup of coffee a day, have maximum if you want. But when I hear stuff that says 4 cups of coffee a day is good for prostate cancer, that's part of that whole consciousness of looking at food, as empirically as reductionistically, looking at the element in there. Oh, wait a second, this is overwhelmed by this element, and this is it's like zinc. It's like if you take a lot of zinc, you're going to throw off your copper. So you want a source of zinc if you're taking zinc, ideally zinc and copper together. But nutrients are they help each other. They work with each other.
Well, you said a really key word with caffeine, and obviously I'm joking about caffeine because it's like everybody's like alcohol and now caffeine. They get overwhelmed sometimes, and it's a definite process. But you said the word stimulant. So can you talk about the stimulant and the distraction that is caused by that?
Well, you'll notice this as you change your diet, which becomes fascinating. You'll see that, I've been really spaced out. I have a bad memory. I don't really have that bad of a memory. I'm doing much better. You'll start to see some of these changes very quickly. We are a society that thrives on stimulation. We like to be stimulated. We love to have that sugar rush. But you don't have a quality of consciousness or clarity. You have energy to move, and you just want to move for the sake of movement. I don't recommend stimulants for healing. I think they're contrary to healing. The physiology of what goes on is fascinating, especially behind coffee, because it does elevate sugar levels. It does lower sugar levels as well. There are over 200 different acids in coffee. Caffeine is an alkaloid from what I understand. So when you take the alkaloid out of the coffee, you're left with excessive acids. So if anybody has a sensitive stomach and they're trying to avoid coffee, decaf might actually aggravate the situation because you're extracting elements out of it. I think we have to look at, because this way of eating is not stimulant oriented, but you have endurance. It's like the difference between having newspaper for a fireplace as opposed to having a log that's burning consistently. And you're standing there and you're just getting a nice consistent warmth. That's what the kind of energy that's the kind of energy transition you go through. So I think the first thing for somebody who has a prostate cancer diagnosis, who really wants to take as much responsibility as they can for this and wants to change their diet and their lifestyle, it's going to require study. It's going to require some information. And it's interesting because I have a lot of prostate cancer clients, and I send them a bunch of PDFs, and maybe 7 out of 10 will read it. There'll always be a couple that won't read anything, and I'll just say, so it's apparent to me you didn't read it. I'm not criticizing you. I'm not yelling at you or castigating you, but why didn't you read it? No, it's just busy. Okay, this tells me your level of involvement. So what I have to tell you, you have to get more serious. This is really important. This is not just getting to the next meal. This is eating something that's going to nourish you right now.
You've said multiple words that I think are really important and important distinctions as far as terms that happen within our dietary state. And especially since we live in an extremely overstimulated environment, right? So you mentioned the word healing. What does healing mean to you for a diet?
Healing means that your way of eating and your way of life, okay, how you sleep, how you play, how you laugh, how you party, how you interact, how you communicate, all of that influences you. It influences digestion. It influences everything in your being. You are automatically going to change once you change your diet, but you have to meet that psychologically by opening up to the kind of person you've been and how can you change. Not that you're not good, just get better. So the definition of healing would be feeling that your symptoms are improving, feeling more clarity, mental clarity, having deeper sleep. People have no idea how important sleep is. I spent about 30 years going to bed at 3 in the morning, and I really wrecked my health for quite a while.
So are the studies where it says that if you have like a certain amount of lack of sleep that you're actually taking years off your life true?
I believe that. I definitely believe that. You'll get a deeper sleep if you go to bed earlier. For me, it's like it was too much to do. I didn't want to go to sleep. And that's great for an ambitious type A personality, but I saw eventually I was suffering. I was getting into a little more stimulants. I'm going to have a little more coffee today. I have about half a cup of coffee a day, maybe half a cup and about a little third of a cup of oat milk. That's my little daily binge. And that's only if I'm really talking a lot or running around. Healing means not just that you're feeling good, but you're having bowel regularity, you're satisfied with your meals, your blood work. How do you test your blood work? I have guys that never test blood work at all. And I say, have you ever gotten a blood test? No. Okay, some
How
blood
often
work.
are you having your clients test their blood work?
Depends. In the beginning, I'm having my clients test their blood every 4 weeks. I don't have them. I recommend, I suggest PSA panel. I do like to see the hormonal panel at least every 2 months, see where it's going. You know, how if it's we want to make sure that your progesterone, your estrogen, your testosterone levels are not aggravating dietary levels. Like if your testosterone gets really low, you're going to aggravate bone. You can aggravate bone growth. There's a number of issues. You can become incredibly tired. Here you are taking coffee because you think you need more energy, and the truth is your vitamin D levels were incredibly low. Now your testosterone is incredibly low, and you're suffering.
So if you have a hormone therapy patient who is feeling fatigue, is vitamin D one of the main things that you're looking at?
Not main, but I definitely want to see vitamin D. And that was my own experience. I ignored vitamin D for a long time. Let me get a vitamin. I was getting a bunch of blood work done, so I said, let me have a vitamin D test. And I saw my results. I thought, oh, cool, I got a 19. And vitamin D levels should be anywhere between 40 and 100. I actually say 30 and 100, but that's kind of low. I know some surgeons will tell me that they won't operate on somebody unless they have a good 50 or 60 in the vitamin D department. I started taking vitamin D. And I started taking 5,000 units a day. Didn't do squat. I mean, after 3 months, it was just up. I was at maybe 29 or something like that. So I started taking 10,000 units a day, which I learned from the physicians I knew wasn't really that much. They were already recommending 10,000 a day. And after 3 more months, my vitamin D got up to 60. And then I started to think, oh, let me look at the other aspects of this. We don't have to become clinicians about our condition, but we need to become more informed about the responsibility of a body owner. The responsibility is learn about what can help you read more definitively what's going on in your body. So you have more to deal with. You have more options. People say, is ginseng good? Should I just take ginseng? I say, look, nothing is good. Stop thinking that. Everything is pertinent to where you're at. So let's find out where you're at. Find out where your blood work is. Find out where your PSA levels are. If you've had a Gleason score, find out let's look at the Gleason as well. But know what the levels are, and then know what you have to change. Know what's your biggest offending factor that you're doing. Drinking 4 or 5 cups of coffee a day. Okay, so we need to cut that down. How do you do that? It's really hard. The reason it's hard is because people get headaches or they have low energy. The answer, and I've done this very successfully, gradually. If you're doing 5 cups a day, take 3. You can get by with 3. Take 3, and take 3 for about 5 or 6 days. And then take 2. You won't see significant symptoms as a result of taking less caffeine. You keep gradually, every 3 to 5 days, reducing it until you get down to like 3/4 of a cup. When you're down to a half or 3/4 of a cup, you can get off coffee without any headaches, because that's a big concern for many people. They get headaches when they go off coffee.
So what other things besides, cutting down on these stimulants and, specifically for hormone therapy patients, we talked about vitamin D and we talked about their energy levels. Is there anything that hormone therapy patients can do from a dietary or supplement level that would benefit them?
Gut bacteria is really critical. The bacteria in our gut that helps us synthesize what we eat. With our negative bacteria, there's positive bacteria. So we want, of course, more positive bacteria, less negative bacteria. But it's a matter of making sure that we have some kind of fermentation in our diet. That's where you get bacteria from. And if you look at traditional diets around the world from different cultures that had agricultures, any culture that had an agriculture ate grain as a principal food. If you look at what these people ate, there was almost always a fermented food. For Japanese people, they took soybeans and they fermented them with rice. They cooked rice and soybeans together with a little bit of salt, a bunch of water, and they cooked it for a day. And then they let it sit for 2 to 3 years. And those soybeans and brown rice settled to the bottom, became like this dark paste. The water became dark. When you pour that water off, that's called, if it's traditionally made, soy sauce. They take the paste, and they use the paste as sort of a soup bouillon. When I do media, I don't use the Japanese word for this dish. I just use what I use as my American definition, which is vegetarian beef broth bouillon paste. That's what I call it. Another word is miso. It's a paste that you add to any kind of soup. It has whole forms of linoleic acid, and lecithin helps dissolve blood fats. It enriches your bacteria. It's like a strengthening cup of coffee.
So what about the people who talk about, and this isn't necessarily pertinent for hormone therapy patients, but a lot of people say, oh, if I eat too much soy, I'm going to have estrogen issues. Is that actually a thing?
Yes, it is, to some degree, but there's great benefit from isoflavonoids as well. Isoflavonoids is an element in tofu, in a lot of soy products that can potentially aggravate you. And supposedly it was a cancer stimulator. And then we found that it wasn't. So there's a lot of people are divided between the two. I generally say, look at the way the Japanese eat miso soup. They add tofu to the miso soup, but there's just a couple of cubes floating around. Tell people tofu is good in America, and they're going to eat slabs of it. And now you have tofu ice cream, you have tofu sauce, you have tofu this, you have tofu that. There's so many those products are healthy, but in moderation.
I want to give people some of the context of how many patients you've treated with prostate cancer.
Okay.
So how many patients do you think over the last 20 years you've seen of prostate cancer patients and men who are going through this process of learning how to heal their bodies?
I'd say just under 1,000.
That's a really big sample pool. How many times are you seeing PSA lowered with a vegan diet?
If somebody follows the program where they're eating grain and bean, lots of vegetables, and they're not living on sugar, they're not eating any sugar, they're eating really reduced amounts of animal protein, maybe once a week, twice a week, minimum, and they're active, and they're participating in their own healing, I see everybody going through positive changes, unless it's highly aggressive, as I've seen some, and in latter stages. Then it's difficult. It can slow that time. But yeah, and I've also seen people who had crazy PSAs that just completely leveled.
On average, when you're talking about to a lesser degree, like let's say they're not in a more aggressive situation, let's say maybe they're localized, newly diagnosed prostate cancer. To what percentage are you seeing the PSA lower?
It's variable. It's always variable. But it's lowered enough that people get excited. And they say, I can't believe it. This is great. My PSA, just like you said, it lowered. I said, did you doubt it? Changing your diet brings out a rubble in a really deep way in many people. So I structure this like an experiment you do to determine if it's going to work for you.
The diagnosis of prostate cancer being so intense, it's like it's a scary situation. But I've had many, many men tell me that being diagnosed with prostate cancer, especially if they're in like a low-grade situation, has been a blessing for them because they've been able to turn their diet around and their lifestyle is just so different. So in reality, when it comes to these, changes, yes, it is really hard, but it sounds like there's so many incredible benefits, not just lowering PSA or feeling better, but, can you speak to some of those other benefits?
You're talking really about perspective, and that's critical for somebody healing. Perspective that says, I'm getting better. Not tells yourself or cons yourself you're getting better, but assesses everything that's going on and realizes that I'm getting better and that I need to do this. And it's a self-reflective ability every day to think about the fact that you're healing yourself. So yeah, you have to think about this. You have to think about where you're going to have lunch tomorrow. And you know what? I might not be able to get what I want to get for lunch. I should just bring something, just in case. A little thermos of soup. Nothing. It's leftover. A little thermos of soup, a couple slices of bread maybe, or, if you're not eating bread, you can even put vegetables in a little glass bowl and take them with you. This requires major upheaval, and a transformation of everything in your life, your relationship. You have to think about your relationship. How supportive is it? What do you need to do more of? How can you work together on this? And what's a division that's going to happen between you in terms of who's going to do this, you doing the cooking, is she doing the cooking? And I've had men say, she's not going to cook. She doesn't want to cook. She doesn't know how to cook this way. And I say, have her sit in our session. And I say, you are part of helping each other. You're helping him, he's helping you. So whoever's most equipped in the kitchen needs to understand, you don't have to learn a whole new way of cooking. There's just a couple of dishes you have to learn. You have to learn how to make a couple of grain dishes, a couple of vegetable dishes. It doesn't take long. And you could make it tasty. And you know what? If it's not tasty, you'll learn to like it. You'll enjoy it. Be grateful you still get to eat. You don't have to fast. Be grateful that, there's some options, that there are people who've made some really serious changes that have halted the progression of this. How? With diet, lifestyle, with medications early on that caught it. So symptomatic, there's a lot to say for symptomatic therapy. I used to be totally against symptomatic therapy in my idealistic days. But no, I've seen dramatic change from it. But it has to be used judiciously with conscious diet and daily activity. I have a guy, a client, prostate cancer. I said, you need to get moving. I don't see you moving anywhere in your diet record. In the log I gave you, it says exercise, you write, went to the store. Was that your activity? Really think about how active we were 100 years ago. We don't move that way. We have all kinds of aids to keep us from exercising. So yeah, it requires movement. Like I recommend yoga to people. Most people say, I don't have time to go to a class. All right, get on YouTube and learn a couple of postures. That's it. I call it 4-12 yoga. 4 positions, 12 minutes. You learn 4 positions, and you could do 1 or 2 variations on them. You'll see in the data and the information. And before you go to bed, do 2 or 3 positions. It's just sustained stretching. And what happens is when you lie down to go to sleep, right away, you're gone. You have a deeper sleep, and you wake up feeling light. That back pain you wake up with every morning, it's not there. And you realize, wow, I need to do more of this. I think we need to be much more active. Being more active will put you more in your body, give you a sense of grounding. I recommend people do work out with weights. The first thing prostate cancer clients are concerned about is weight loss, because a lot of them lose weight very quickly when they're eating this way. Now, if you're overweight and you want to lose weight, no problem. If you are underweight, then of course we still need to make a change. And you have to understand within any dietary change, within any transition, there's going to be some weight loss as you learn to reabsorb. So don't beat yourself up. Don't be getting on a scale every day and I'm worrying and fretting, because it creates a whole new chronic stress for you. And that stress has to be relaxed. And one of the best ways to relax your stress is by eating something sweet. It becomes a cycle of stress, sweet, stress, sweet.
So when we're talking about prostate cancer patients who are concerned about weight loss, you have the wide spectrum. You have 40% of the United States that needs to lose weight, and then you have kind of people in the middle, and then you have the people who are really concerned, I don't want to lose weight, and I already am I'm going to go under. So do you count calories for these patients?
No, because that never works. I don't count calories. I just talk about food, eating more food volume. And they say, well, I can't, that's overeating. I said, well, get a 4th meal in. More in frequency, less in volume. And what's going to happen is you're going to start getting better ability to absorb that food, and you're going to feel better. You're going to feel very different. You have to use your own self as a gauge. Now, I have this guy, I was starting to mention this before. He's a prostate cancer client, and I said, you need to be active. You need to be get moving. So he'll move, and he'll tell me, I went to the store today, I did this, and I said, no, you're not getting it. You need to find a walking place and just go for a walk. He says, I'm so busy. I said, with what? He said, I got tapes I have to listen to, I got things for work. I said, why don't you just get a stationary bike and put it in front of a table and have your phone there, have your video there, and you could learn to talk on the phone. I've had people do that. I've had people become bike racers. Guys that had no intention of ever getting on a bike. And they get on, they start feeling better, they start moving around. Activity is a real neutralizer of many, many problems people have.
So you mentioned weightlifting. How often are you, asking people to lift some weights?
Nobody's trying to compete professionally, so it's understood that the weight is just to keep in shape, as opposed to, so you don't have to go through a heavy training regime, number 1, take the pressure off right away. Number 2, I'd probably recommend twice a week. Depends on the individual. It really depends on the individual. If they're really focused on vanity, you want to make sure that they understand. They're not going to lose weight very long. They're not going to start looking really depleted. Placate them a little bit like that. And because they're going to start feeling better no matter what. And that's what's happened. Because as the client lost weight, that was totally undesirable. But he started feeling really good. So he was flexible about it. I said, just give it a couple more pounds. And then after that, he just finally stopped losing weight. He actually started gaining a couple of pounds. Everybody is different. You know, generally speaking, we can eat the same thing. Generally speaking. But some people might need a little animal protein. Some people might need no animal protein. It might be better for them for where they're at. But there are foods that we know will aggravate this condition. And instead of waiting till all the research is in and the definitive idea is established, do it now. You don't have to wait. You can go crazy with details and information. And also, you have to understand, when you see articles like prostate cancer diet, they give, these are the supplements you should take, this is the foods you should eat. It's like, nobody can follow that. Very few people can follow that. It's given as a suggestion, as a template suggestion. And my template suggestion is very similar. It's grain, bean, vegetable, and there's always a little percentage I leave blank. And I always say, this is WYW. It means whatever you want. And then the next question I get from a guy will be, does that mean I can have it every day? And I say, do you know that you're going to want it every day? Yeah. I said, no, that's called addiction. And let's think about what you had yesterday. Maybe something you had yesterday inspired you to eat that. Once you get through all this and you will learn this, you'll never be the same. And I say that in a very positive way, because you start to have an idea of what are the aggravating factors. And suddenly it's not strange and it's not somebody doing it to you. You know, it's easier to take responsibility when you feel that there are things that you can do. I mean, nobody has a definitive corner on the market here. But we do know less animal protein is better. Less dairy food, seriously, is better. Sugar is not your friend. The real issue is just getting people to get over their addiction. And their addiction to sweet, and their addiction to just the connections they have to memories of food, sentimental foods. You know, I used to have that all the time, I want to eat it now. But you don't need it now, it's not good for you, but I want to eat it now. But you have to talk to that voice. See, very often it's the rebel voice that comes in. No, don't tell me what to do. We think we're in control, but really what we're doing is we're just assigning the rebel control. And the rebel's in control. And that's not really control. So if you really want to be in control, yeah, you have to become knowledgeable about what works for you, what doesn't, and you have to experiment.
Outside of animal protein, out of the 1,000 patients that you've dealt with that have had prostate cancer, is there anything else that they should not be taking that does aggravate this disease on average?
I basically just think it's the extremes. It's sweet will aggravate it, fat will aggravate it. Again, those foods affect hormonal systems as well, and so will animal protein. So those are the three chief foods that we depend on. But sometimes people say, well, there's nothing left to eat. Yeah, in your lexicon of what you're familiar with. But there's a whole world out there. How open are you to trying? This is testing you on every level. And you got to be up for it. It's just this cosmic kick. It's easy to say, and sometimes it's really hard to watch, but I've seen people really triumph. I have another client, and his wife won't do anything. So he feels really unsupportive. And I said, the issue is not your wife won't do anything. The issue is you can't talk to your wife. You need to learn to communicate better. Well, every time I say something, you need to learn what the triggers are and maybe get some therapy. Everybody can use therapy. It's not a bad thing. It's just having an outside voice. You know, we have toxic jobs, most of us. We don't like our work. You know, many people I talk to do not like the work they do, just doing it to get by or to get something better. And so they're dreading when they work. Then they have to go home. And if they don't have a home organized, if they don't have a good relationship, if they don't have a real supportive lifestyle, they don't want to be home either. So where do you go? Where's your oasis of sanity? Make your house more healthier. Make sure it's breathing. Get more wood in your house, less metal, less glass. So yeah, you don't have to mix and match. You just need to learn how to process. And we never learn this stuff, so it takes time.
I really appreciated Mr. Varona coming in and answering our questions. And if you have further questions on diet and nutrition, please leave them in the comment section below this video because he's going to come film with us again. And it's a great way to get your questions answered. Also, if this video was helpful for you, give us a thumbs up and just let us know whether or not, because it's important that we create content that is tailored to your needs. Now, I know that diet and nutrition can be a very hard thing to get control of, but there are resources that may be out there that you may not know you have access to. So I would ask your medical oncologist, or I would ask your primary care physician, is there a nutritionist at the hospital that I can talk to that can go over what my dietary needs are based off of my situation? And I would even contact your insurance. Sometimes they have wellness apps, hotlines, or different resources that are available for diet and nutrition that we don't even know about. Sometimes Medicare does. So it's important to know what those resources are. And if you would like to talk to Mr. Varona, we'll go ahead and leave his information in the description of this video as well. Now, he's also written some books, and so we'll link those books as well, and there are other videos that he's done, so we'll link his channel. Now, diet, as I've said, can be difficult, and it is important to know the resources, but things even just keeping like a food diary, there's like an app called Carb and other food tracking apps that can be very helpful and can show you what your macros are and just help you keep track. What I would encourage you to do is just take some time in the morning or the day before in the evening and kind of think about, what do I need to consume today? What does my agenda look like? And how can I best take care of myself? What can I order ahead of time? Or maybe I should just look up the menu ahead of time and think about, this is what I would like to stick to. And if it is very overwhelming, small, tiny steps of success are really important, especially when we're overwhelmed. So I wouldn't, take all the meat out of your diet if that's something you're intending to do all at once, unless you feel like you're capable of it. Maybe just eliminating one thing at a time. Maybe you do a little less meat at breakfast or a little less meat at lunch. And you just take it one small step at a time as you're tracking what you're eating, and then you'll see those trends continue to grow. It can be incredibly helpful. Now, please contact our helpline if you need any help or have questions about diet and nutrition. They both, the men that are on that helpline, they have gone through tremendous diet changes, and they are just a great resource for men in general to deal with prostate cancer. But because they've been through prostate cancer, they've changed their diet, they have a wealth of information for you, and it's just a really great resource, and you can contact them at pcri.org/helpline. Please remember that you are so important. We care about you, and you're not alone. Reach out for help. It's important that you get it. And I hope you have a great week.